you talked right away in chapter 1 about action points and how knowing your action point can help you not be yelling at your kids to get them to move and do things. Can you help us understand what an action point is?
Yes. So we created a video series that accompanies the book now. The video series is called Home Improvement, a Practical Theology for Parenting, because we want parents to understand the theology behind the practical things that we're doing. So in the book, then, we teach parents about an action point, because the action point is the hands and feet of the theology of parenting when it comes to obedience. If we can get that obedience idea in our minds, and we ask the question, okay, how can I implement obedience with my child in a strategic way? And that's where we come to this idea of action point. An action point is the point where you stop talking and you start acting. And the interesting thing about it is your child already knows where your action point is. So, and sometimes you can even ask them and they will say, it's when you yell at me, or when you start moving toward me. Children know that they better stop doing whatever they're doing, because mom means business now, even though she said it 5 times before. Now we know this is the time where I better start moving, or something is going to happen here that I don't like.
Yeah. So mom has an action point. Dad has an action point. The Sunday school teacher has an action point. Everybody and they're all different for different adults.
That's right. And I think that's why the babysitter has a hard time with the children sometimes, because she has a very loose action point. I think sometimes grandma has a tighter action point. Sometimes she has a looser action point, but every parent has an action point. And the action point determines at what point a child starts responding. And the interesting thing is, children know how to respond in given situations. That's why they act differently at school than they do at home, or they respond differently to dad than they do to mom. A lot of it has to do with the way the instructions are communicated, because children learn how to play the game, so to speak. They learn what the rules are of the relationship that they're involved in.
Okay, so my kid seems to know my action point, but if I'm mom, if I'm dad, I'm watching this, how do I figure out what my action point is? How do I start recognizing the cues that I'm using to get kids to obey?
That's a real good question. And I think one of the greatest things to do is ask kids. I mean, kids know, how do you know when your dad means business? Well, his eyes get narrow, and he sticks his neck out. How do you know when what mom's action point is? Well, the vein on her neck starts bulging. I mean, children can see these things,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes they can. Sometimes it's just the idea of yelling as opposed to using words. But I think that parents feel uncomfortable many times because their kids don't do what they want them to do. When I ask the question in a parenting seminar, I say, how many of you have a problem with your child either not following instructions right away, you have to tell them several times, their attitude isn't right? Most of the parents raise their hand.
Yeah.
We have a problem with kids not listening. And I'm sure you do the same when you teach the parenting seminar.
Yeah.
And I think that that's because of this idea of action point. So when parents start to change it just makes a big difference in the lives of families. I'm training coaches right now. One of the coaches, I was reading her report today. This is the week 2 report. So week 1 is just finished. Mom has realized that she does a lot of yelling and she wants to stop doing that. And so I said to her, I want to find out from this mom, how is she thinking differently and how is she acting differently? Because I want to share that with other parents. One of my clients right now has a similar problem. She uses intensity to get things done, and her children know it. When she gets into Rambo mode, man, her kids start moving because mom's at it now. So, but I don't think we have to have that intensity. I think we can use words to communicate our action point. But just ask yourself this question. Okay, say you've said it once and your child doesn't do it. And so you say it again and your child doesn't do it. You say it again a third time and your child doesn't do it. What do you do next that gets your child moving? That's how you're going to tell what your action point is. And many times it's things that aren't that productive. So we want to go back to the beginning here and redesign the action point in a way that parents can use it much more effectively.
Yeah. And so we really need to eliminate negative cues that we're using to cue kids in, because it's negatively impacting the relationship too then.